Seek.
Kia ora team, welcome to our lockdown wholesome half hour. This is a little bit different. Got Mackenzie on my over here. I can like virtually high five you.
You exist. Can we do a virtual high five? Like how well would that work?
We could try. There we go. There we go.
Are we touching hands? Tell me.
Back your hand off a little bit. A little bit more. A little bit more. Yeah, there we go.
Contact.
But yeah, a little strange time with the whole lockdown situation. So we thought we'd start. Obviously, we have been away for most of the term, but we thought now that you guys are back at school, we'll have some content out for you, something to entertain you in your little lockdown school setup. It's a pretty different situation, like not going to school, learning from home. So we thought we'll get a little started, and we're probably going to have a daily show for you from now on for at least for the next few weeks. But yeah, we thought on today's episode, we'll give you a bit of a insight into what that might look like and give you a bit of an overview of what you might see, and also a few like pointers on how we'd recommend schooling in lockdown now that we're back to school.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a weird time, and I think it's defined by its unpredictability. And so dealing in this time is a unique challenge, I think, that has been presented to, the entirety of humanity at this stage, really, which sounds like a very overblown thing to say, but it's really not in a weird way. But that's fine. We're doing the best that we can with what we have, I think, and that is the most important thing that we really can be doing right now.
Yeah, definitely. It is like we won't beat around the bush. Like, this is a pretty unusual situation, like being stuck at home, and like it is normal to like feel weird about that, like mentally, physically. Like, it is like very unusual to have like very limited social contact. Like, humans are by nature like social creatures, so to not be able to physically connect with one another is pretty unusual. I guess before we go too far deep, I'll give you like some of the specifics. So we're thinking every day we'll put this podcast out on YouTube and probably on Instagram as well. At
we'll
10 o'clock.
Promote it in all the usual typical places, I think.
Yeah. So it will come out every day at 10 o'clock. Some of them will be with me and Mackenzie. Some of them will be with me and someone else. Some of them might be with Mackenzie and someone else. So we're really hoping to utilize and show off a wide range of our study time faces.
Yeah. We'll put our faces back out there, I guess. We've heard the cries for the wholesome half hour, and we have listened. There have been many.
No, definitely. And also, I guess the purpose of this is we want to give you practical strategies on how to deal with the lockdown and still continue and try not to impede your learning too much. But we also really want to hear from you about what you want to hear from us, and we're really keen to answer your questions. So every day we're going to try post something up on our Instagram and maybe our Facebook as well, asking you about your questions, and each day we'll try to tackle one of those or a couple of those and see if we can point you in the right direction.
Yeah, I think And I think that sort of also highlights sort of something in this period that, despite all this awfulness, like this whole situation, obviously has not stemmed from good things. But I think there are good things that have come out of it. And honestly, and this goes beyond New Zealand. It doesn't, translate to anybody in particular. But I think something that has been really cool around this time is seeing the way that, despite being apart, we have, as humans in general, I guess, being able to kind of band together and provide the help that we can in the small ways that we can. And I think it's those small differences right now, and it's those small things that we're doing with what we have that are both keeping our spirits up, but actually getting us through these situations as well.
Yeah, totally. I guess today, I think the main thing we wanted to talk about is two of the key things that we should all remember going back to school today. And I guess we'll pop through those one by one. I guess the first thing is like this. The first thing we need to remember: this isn't going to be forever. This isn't going to be our permanent situation, right? This is only temporary. Like, when I say it's only temporary, we don't know how long it could go on for. Like, lockdown could go on for like another, like, it's definitely going to go on for at least another week. but it could
Yeah.
go on for another 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And
Yeah.
the other restrictions, like not being able to go overseas, maybe not being able to travel outside of your city, that could last much longer. But in the grand scheme of things, like this isn't going to be an issue in like 5 years' time. It's very unlikely.
Yeah.
And the most invasive things, like not being able to see other people who like live in the same area as you, that is probably going to be the most temporary thing.
Yes. Yes. And I think that's a really good point, is the things that maybe I'm only speaking for myself right now, but in terms of what's happening in this scenario, like I know myself personally, the thing that I'm struggling with the most is, not being able to see a lot of the people that I rely on a lot of my really good friends. And you have that contact through FaceTime, or if there are people out there using Discord and whatever house party is popping right now. And they're better than nothing, don't get me wrong, but they're not the same. And I know for myself, that's the thing that I'm struggling with the most, is not having that direct contact with the people around me who I really love, and am so accustomed, I think, to seeing so frequently as well. And I think that's going back to my high school self. I think that probably would have been one of the most jarring things for me. Like, it's not being in school, it's not learning, it's feeling like you don't have the same kind of people or resources available to sort of help you through.
Absolutely. I mean, you're literally never seeing anyone outside of your household except for like strangers down the street. Like, that's like really strange. And that really, really strange part is hopefully not going to last too long. Like, it may be like 2 or 4 weeks, but we've done 2 weeks now, right? So we kind of get an insight into that, and that won't go forever. So just remember, it is only temporary.
Yeah. And I think, that mantra, that thought, I think will really help us in actually getting through this period and making the most of this time as well, because just because a lot of things have been brought to a halt doesn't mean everything has to be brought to a halt. And bearing in mind, that the situation is only temporary, even though it feels very permanent, I think right now, particularly as we're quite in the, thick of the lockdown, and it's very easy for us as humans to kind of get sucked into the temporary and to begin to think about it like it's permanent. To see this current situation as something that will be for, however long. And like Sarah said, we don't know how long this will last. If Auntie Cindy will let us out again next week, that'll be lovely. But, that is not... That would be like the best case scenario right now, I guess. And I think one of the most important things is hope for the best, but prepare for the worst.
Yeah. And in terms of the school-specific stuff, like the government and the Ministry of Education is working a lot to make sure the school year is as uninterrupted as possible. I wouldn't worry about your assessments and stuff too much. There might be some temporary, like especially with internals, reshuffling of those. But for the most part, your like schooling assessment shouldn't be affected too much. Like the modes of assessment might vary a little bit, but you'll still definitely have a chance to complete your like NCA level 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever you're doing this year. I wouldn't worry too much about that.
And I think that's a really good point. Sorry, I think I just interrupted you.
No,
but
right. I love that. You have to deal with the old like video call, like
as if we don't already, like, it doesn't matter if we're right beside each other or in a video call, Sarah. We will talk over each other and we will interrupt each other. This is not new to the distance.
You can talk now. That's fine. You're authorized to speak.
Oh, thank you. Oh God, all that banter and I forgot what I was saying. No. So yeah, like Sarah said, schools are working really, really hard to be as uninterrupted as possible at the moment. And I think some students are still waiting to hear a lot from their teachers and stuff. And honestly, one of my biggest, maybe not recommendations, but just things to bear in mind around this time. And it feeds into what I was saying before about all the good things that are also happening. And I think around this time, everyone needs to, do a bit of an exercise in their patience and their ability to maybe not necessarily, the word forgive is probably a little bit too strong for the situation, I would say, but give allowances that things aren't going to be the same for a while, and that we are all in this boat together. Um, it's teachers trying to figure out their curriculums for you when you go back to school. They are just as unsure about this as you are. Hopefully a little bit less because, they're the ones organizing your classes and whatnot.
Yeah.
But this is an unprecedented situation for them as well. And I think one of the biggest things to bear in mind when going back to, online school or distance learning or whatever it is that your school is doing, like to sort of give allowances for the fact that everyone is just trying to figure out how to function at this point of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're not going to get it right the first time around. Nobody ever gets it right the first time around. So, practice a bit of patience, practice a little bit of, forgiveness or allowance. And that will also very much help in this situation because nobody's expected to work at 100% right now, I don't think. And that applies to both you, but also, for all the other people that you have around you right now. We always look up to our teachers as people who sort of, a little bit of omnipotent beings sometimes, of people who have all the answers or know exactly what's going on. But I think in this situation, there's just no guarantee of that.
Yeah, 100%. So I guess playing right off that, the second thing that I wanted to talk about today is trying to focus on what you can control. Like there's a lot of things you can't control. You can't control when the lockdown's going to be lifted, and you can't control a lot of the things in the world right now, much more so than like you would be able to in your usual life. So try focus on what you can control. Like when you keep thinking about all the stuff that you can't control, that can be quite anxiety inducing, and that's completely normal. It's like very unusual situation, but by thinking of what you can control, you can start to take control of that anxiety a little bit and try take your learning into your own hands a little bit.
And I think with that and focusing in on what you can control, it doesn't have to be an exercise of like gripping what you can tightly and controlling it with an iron fist. It's about in focusing in on what you can control. It's also acknowledging the things that you can't control. And I think quite often we get stuck in this spiral of rumination about all the things that we feel powerless about. And so sometimes, in keeping spirits up and keeping us going and giving us things that we can actually do, we need to kind of read between the lines a little bit and say, okay, here are all these things that I can't control. That's annoying or frustrating or, but what are the things that I can control, and how will this help me in feeling like I'm doing the best I can with what I have? And I think that's one of the most important things around this time is, crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's and, having everything perfectly in place, it just isn't super feasible right now as well. And so I think it's also about reassessing your expectations of yourself. If you're feeling out of control over something, like I really encourage people to think about why they feel out of control, because sometimes what we realize is that we have these assumptions sitting in the back of our head that we're working off that isn't necessarily coming from somewhere else. I do this all the time. This is one of the things I'm really, really bad at. And I think it's something that, for example, if you're thinking about the quality of your work, maybe it's something that you always strive to do is to put your best foot forward as possible. And you might not think you're able to do that right now. But at the end of the day, you doing your best in this situation is the best that you can do. And I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but I think it's working within your conditions and acknowledging your conditions will help you reframe your own expectations of yourself and what you both are and aren't capable of doing right now. You can't sit down for an 8-hour school day at the moment. That's just not viable for like the way our brains function, the way they work best, and all these kinds of things. Don't set yourself the like unattainable goals of, maybe you have 5-6 periods of class a day. Don't expect yourself to be doing that when you're back at school. Work with what schools give you and work within what you can, but not maybe what you want, because we are limited around this time.
Yeah. And I think this is our third point, but I think Mackenzie pretty much covered it perfectly, is like reframing your thinking and trying to make an effort to push towards a positive mindset, focusing on today rather than trying to continuously think about the future, and looking at your progress and what you've achieved today rather than constantly looking at your difficulties and what you haven't achieved. Focusing on the options and resources that you do have available to you at the moment rather than continuously thinking about what you're missing. These are a lot of the mental strategies that you can use to really reframe your thinking and sort of take control of the current situation and put your learning back into your own hands.
Yeah. And I genuinely, it's funny because what I'm about to say is something that I've been trying to articulate in an article for maybe the past 2 weeks. So I want to kind of try and get it out there now. But I think it's so important, I think, around this time for us to all be thinking about our learning as our learning, not school prescribed learning. Schools are an institution to facilitate education, but they are not the gatekeepers of education. Like, there are back doors. You can get through. You can still learn. And I think that is a very unappealing idea for many students because learning has become this mandatory thing in our minds. It's a requirement. It's essentially the only reason why we shouldn't put you out in the workforce at the moment. I'm kidding, by the way. We're not in like 1940s London, but like it's fine. Or maybe I don't know. Anyway, don't quote me on that. But like, your learning is not restricted to an institution. It facilitates it for sure, and you get spoon-fed that for sure. But at the end of the day, the skills that you acquire are for you alone. They are not for, a teacher's grade or, to get from one point to the other. It's about the process. It's about respecting the fact that you are gaining knowledge. And I'm going on a rant right now and I don't care. I think it's so important to just think this time that your own learning, and I think this is one of the biggest things that can empower students, it doesn't have to come from school. It doesn't have to be, by some guidelines that you've gotten in an achievement standard or a course outline or some learning outcomes or objectives or whatever other name that teachers want to put on it. It's for you. You're the one gaining the skills from it. Learn what you want. Do what interests you. Look into what interests you, because that's still learning, but we don't often associate it as such. Gaining a skill is learning. You learn how to kick a ball. You learn how to write. You learn how to, grammatical structure or whatever. But you
learn how to make good TikToks.
I don't think that exists. God, are we actually going to talk about TikToks in the first episode?
TikTok is...
I know you love TikTok.
It's like, it's even better in lockdown. The quality of TikToks are like they've gone up.
Oh, I imagine so. I think TikTok quality probably has like a positive relationship with the amount of boredom somebody experiences. I don't know. TikTok is such a cesspool in my mind, but it's fine. I know people
You're gonna get a lot of backlash for this. I feel like a lot of our audiences would be into TikTok. Unless I'm really out of touch, which is possible now.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm somebody who doesn't like social media in general. I probably would have deleted my Facebook and Instagram a couple of years back if, not for study time. So,
yeah,
which is an interesting idea. But that's fine. That's not important right now. But I think, yeah, it's I'm going to say it just one more time, but your learning is not restricted to a school. It is not. It just simply isn't. Learning the knowledge that you gain as a person will transcend a school. It will transcend the years. It goes beyond a simple assignment, and really keeping that in mind and aiming to, learn for the sake of yourself rather than for a school is, I think, an opportunity we don't often get. And I'm not saying that it would be a wasted opportunity not to do it, but I think at least giving it some thought and not abandoning the idea of learning with the idea of schools being closed is such a valuable thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a good place to leave it. But nah, I totally agree with you. But yeah, so coming up for the rest of the week, we're gonna have this every weekday. So we'll be there on Thursday and Friday as well, 10 o'clock. We'll drop the episode, and we're gonna break down some of the other stuff that might be helpful in enhancing your learning from home experience. But also we 100% want to hear from you and see what you want to know. So if you have anything you want us to talk about regarding like learning from home or anything related to that, let us know. We'll put up a like question thing on our Instagram story, or if you can't find it, just like DM us, Instagram, whatever. We hope to hear from you there. But unless you have anything else to say, we'll see you tomorrow, 10 o'clock.
No, the only thing I was going to add is when we're wanting to hear from you, we will be posting up like Instagram stories asking for your guys' questions, hopefully on like a daily basis, like the day before that episode will be released. So, keep an eye out on Instagram stories as well for any questions and prompts and things like that as well.
100%. We'll see you tomorrow, 10 o'clock. Be here. Bye.
Bye, guys.